There are more questions tonight about how police in British Columbia handled the Robert Pickton investigation, this time prompted by the release of video at the missing women's inquiry.
RCMP seized thousands of pieces of potential evidence when they raided Robert Pickton's Port Coquitlam pig farm.
Already the leading suspect in the case of Vancouver's missing women, it was a relaxed Robert William Pickton who sat down with police.
Was found guilty in 2007 of 6 counts of second-degree murder in the deaths of 6 women. 20 additional first-degree murder charges against him were stayed because he was already serving the maximum sentence. That controversial decision was announced by the Attorney General at the time, Wally Opal. He later led the inquiry into the Pickton case, which found egregious police errors.
At some stage, you have to rely on the RCMP.
There's already no justice in Tanya's case because it's a state case.
This latest step by the RCMP sends the message that the missing and murdered women's cases are closed, despite the majority of them being unsolved.
It's like being dragged through the mud all over again, like they're reopening the wound. If these were their family members, there is no way that they would destroy this evidence, and there would be more people convicted. There would be more charges.
It really disgusts me knowing that the worst serial killer in Canadian history has the nerve.
Welcome back, friends. Today, we're diving into the horrific story of Robert Pickton, widely considered one of Canada's most prolific serial killers, examining the tragic fates of his victims and how law enforcement's apathy perpetrated the cycle of violence. In particular, the numerous times police had Pickton in custody and let him go for mere pennies on the dollar, regardless of the obvious evidence against him. How could they be so blind? Did they even care about the victims? We'll piece together the chilling details of how Pickton lured victims to his farm, known as the Piggy Palace, where he subjected them to gruesome murders and dismemberment, by analyzing evidence from detectives, witnesses, and even family members. From genuine police bias to missed opportunities, get ready, because this case is going to leave you with some serious questions about the Canadian justice system. To understand his crimes better, we must go back to the beginning. Robert Pickton was born into a family of pig farmers in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, which lies just east of Vancouver in British Columbia. Pickton's parents felt the family pig farm wouldn't be suitable for raising a little girl, so they sent Pickton's sister Linda to live with relatives in Vancouver. This could either be seen as a smart move in hindsight, or a foreshadowing of what's to come. Robert and his younger brother David started working on the farm at a very young age. Their mother was extremely strict, making the brothers work long hours, tending the farm's livestock, and even putting the pigs' needs before that of the family's own hygiene.
The life on their farm was very primitive. The animals were always allowed to run in and out of the Pickton house. The Pickton children were famous for stinking of manure and of pigs and unwashed clothing and unwashed bodies. When they got on the school bus in the morning, children didn't want to sit near them, and they called them Stinky Piggy. She really was a tyrant. She ran the roost. The kids worked very, very hard, and she had this distinctive voice. She'd shout at the kids and say, "You kids get over here right now," and she'd screech at them.
A story related to by many of his Port Coquitlam family members was his sadness upon learning that his parents had killed his pet calf, a pet calf he had raised for years as a youngster. He told the stories to others often. He loved that calf, and he was never able to move past it.
I really don't think he enjoyed life on the farm, but he knew it was his responsibility, that it was something he had to do.
In high school, Robert never dated, maybe because girls avoided him. His personal hygiene was infamous, both during and after school. Robert just didn't fit in, and often found himself in trouble. In 1963, he had enough. He struggled academically and was placed in special education classes for years before quitting halfway through. He left school to start working as a meat cutter and did so for almost 7 years before quitting to work full-time at the family farm, which didn't end up being a very wise decision. Much of Robert's struggles early on in life must be attributed to his mom's influence. Case in point,
It was a family where if you could get away with something, you got away with it.
Pickton's mother was extremely antisocial, and I think it was those antisocial traits that Louise had that really affected Willie and really shaped his feelings about what he could get away with.
on the evening of October 16, 1967, when Robert's brother Dave was 16 years old and had recently acquired his driver's license, he took his father's 1960 truck from the farm and headed east along Dominion Avenue towards Burns Road in Port Coquitlam. It was about 7:40 p.m. Just ahead of him, on the right side of the street, was one of the local neighborhood kids, a 14-year-old boy named Tim Barrett. The exact details are unknown, but Dave suddenly slammed right into him. Dave knew right away that Tim, who was laying crumpled on the road, was badly hurt, and he raced home in a panic to tell his mother what happened. Louise Pickton hurried over to the place where Tim lay. After looking the injured boy over, she leaned him down and rolled him into the ditch that ran along the side of the road. He then simply turned and went home. A real sweetheart, and tells you quite a lot about the woman who raised Robert Pickton. Robert was still busy at the farm in 1991. Relatives of a growing list of missing women, along with advocates for sex trade workers, established the annual Valentine's Day Remembrance, a press for tougher police investigation. You see, Vancouver, mainly the downtown east side, had a serious problem. That problem? A growing list of missing women that never seemed to get shorter. As days passed, it only grew and grew. Enter Sarah DeVries, a native child adopted by white parents who divorced when she was very young. She was on her journey to joining the notorious Vancouver's downtown east side as one of its latest victims to drug addiction and prostitution.
I was 12 and I found this video and it had my mom's name on it. So I decided to watch it. And the first thing I saw was my mom's arm, and it was all covered in blood, and she had the needle, and she was shooting heroin. You're not supposed to see that ever. It's not normal. And no child should have to see their mother doing that. But I think, in a way, I'm glad I saw the video. I think I was just happy to see her, even if she was doing heroin. It was a chance to see her again.
Back on the farm in 1994, Pickton struck gold as he joined his two siblings in inheriting all the family real estate after their parents passed away. Soon after, they sold off a portion of that land and made a staggering $5.16 million. Robert and his brothers used the remaining facilities to host lavish events and wild parties. The farm infamously became known as the Piggy Palace. Robert entered into what could only be known as his party animal phase. Authorities in Port Coquitlam eventually filed a lawsuit against the Pickton brothers on the grounds that they had altered a large farm building on the land for the purpose of holding dances, concerts, and other recreation, and had disregarded the agricultural use for which the property had been zoned. In response, they filed for the Piggy Palace Good Times Society, a non-profit charity with the Canadian government in 1996. Claiming to organize, coordinate, manage, and operate special events, functions, dances, shows, and exhibitions on behalf of service organizations, sports organizations, and other worthy groups, after they had started to neglect the site's farming operations. But in reality, events there featured raves and wild parties with sex workers from Vancouver and get-togethers in the farm's converted slaughterhouse at 953 Dominion Avenue in Port Coquitlam. Up to 2,000 people attended these events, and it was known that Hell's Angels frequented the property. While the Picktons were enjoying their newfound wealth, Sarah DeVries was still on the streets. However, she was much more than a prostitute or drug addict. She was also referred to as a good, sometimes heroic friend, a thoughtful writer of journals and poetry. In another odd twist of fate, Sarah added this poem to her journal in 1997.
It's funny, all the things that she liked to do and liked doing are things that I like to do and like doing. She loved to read, she loved to draw, she loved acting, and she loved swimming, she liked horseback riding. She liked writing, she wrote a lot. Poems, short stories. And those are all things I love to do. If I could do them all at once, that'd be awesome.
They think that because they pay for you, they can treat you like a sex tool. They think because they paid for it, you aren't going to tell anybody. They think because you're a hooker, you don't feel any emotions, you don't feel any pain. You're just doing it for the money, and you don't feel anything. But you do. I'm not just speaking for myself. I'm speaking for everybody else. You know, they do. They are human, they feel, and just because you are paying them money doesn't mean you can treat them like total shit, because they have feelings too. So that's Sarah at 17, talking about her life, and I think doing it very, very well.
Despite all that we later learned, Robert was earning himself quite a reputation with the local women.
He spent large amounts of money on the girl, whatever she wanted, for like endless amounts. So when they returned, they would brag about him to their friends that this guy is like really good guy to go be with.
On March 23rd, 1997, Pickton was accused of trying to kill prostitute Wendy Lynn after stabbing her multiple times during a fight at the farm. Wendy had reported to authorities that although Pickton had shackled her, she had managed to get away after sustaining multiple cuts. She informed them that she had taken his firearm away from him and stabbed him. Wendy later recovered at the closest emergency room, while Pickton sought care at Eagle Ridge Hospital. On January 27, 1998, the attempted murder charge against Pickton was delayed because Wendy had a drug addiction problem, and the prosecution thought her unstable enough that her testimony wouldn't be enough to get a conviction.
The defense worked very hard to undermine her credibility with a great deal of success.
He was eventually freed on a $2,000 bond. Coincidentally, with Robert now back out on the street, in April of 1988, Sarah DeVries was reported missing to the local authorities in Vancouver.
My sister went missing from the downtown east side in Vancouver on April 14th, 1998.
This drives you crazy. I went to jail for a while ago for 6 months, and they made me put cold turkey, and I would rather be dead.
2.5, maybe?
That was nice of her to say she doesn't care if she dies.
Well,
okay, you can play it again.
She means, she doesn't really mean she doesn't care if she dies. She means that she needs the drugs so much. Yeah, you're right there, you can see. She needs the drugs so much that she can't think about dying. She has to just think about getting the drugs. She can't worry about dying.
Later that year, due to a continuously growing list of missing women, the Vancouver police set up a team to review files of as many as 40 women misplaced as far back as 1971. For example, Miss Schenner joined the Vancouver Missing Persons Unit in July 1998. She was quickly made the unit's lead investigator and file coordinator. It seemed the Vancouver Police Department brass had finally accepted that prostitutes from the downtown east side were vanishing without a trace. Those cases became her focus. Early in her assignment, her enthusiasm for her job waned because she discovered how thinly resourced the Missing Persons Unit really was.
What resonates for me is that in our particular investigation in Vancouver, where when I took on the investigation, we had 17 missing women. Over a third of them were Indigenous. But the overarching thing that struck me was just the intersectionality of all the different factors that were coming into play. We had classism right off the top. We had sexism. We had racism. We had bias against women that were living in poverty, working in the sex trade and the survival sex trade. These were all issues that I was faced with.
Continuing with their Piggy Palace lifestyle, the Pickton brothers held a wild 1998 New Year's Eve celebration. Since they disregarded mounting legal pressure due to their boisterous ways, they were subsequently hit with an injunction prohibiting them from hosting any parties in the future. The police were then authorized to arrest and remove any person attending any future gatherings. The following year, the Society's non-profit status was revoked due to its incapacity to submit financial statements. After that, it was dissolved. With the combination of missing women, various run-ins with the law, and the official shutdown of Piggy Palace, things were finally starting to heat up against Robert Pickton. In April of '99, the Vancouver Police Board posted a $100,000 reward for information on missing women cases. 2 years later, in 2001, the Vancouver Police and RCMP formed Joint Task Force, Project Even-Handed, to replace the local police force's stalled investigation. This task force was far from successful. Lead investigator at the time, Schenner, and other officers were told the review team was winding down, that the RCMP was going to review the entire investigation and basically assume the missing women's files. It became obvious the Vancouver Police Department was looking for an opportunity to dump this case. Shenner noted to the Vancouver Sun, "I told them of the setup of the MPRT, of the shell game that was the VPD's response to these women's disappearances, of the incompetent people we were forced to work with."
And just to give you a bit of an idea of my background, I came to policing, I had been a reporter, and I joined the police department. And right from that time, it was a very interesting kind of experience because in the police academy, it's very, everything's very theoretical, and they talk to you in ways that, everyone there has joined to help people. And I was certainly the same. And they tell you at that time in the academy, if you see things in the job that concern you, talk to your sergeant, talk to people, come back to the academy, tell us, we'll help you. There's all this this help that's presented. And I can tell you that in the first day that I joined the police department, and I walked with my partner on the beat in the downtown east side, and I watched him take a handcuff hook and ream out the mouth of a drug dealer with the sharp end of that hook, looking for drugs that weren't there. And I knew in that instant, A, I knew it was wrong, and I was horrified, and B, I knew I was so already in that first day overwhelmed by that police culture that I knew that it was unsafe for me to speak out about that. And that is the experience of the police culture that permeates all of these investigations. And so what you have is a very dominant culture, and you have well-meaning, the police are always recruiting. They're recruiting visible minorities, they're recruiting women, they want people, they want you to join that family. And then as soon as you do join, you are completely submerged by that culture, and you actually become that culture, and you can no longer, I think, do the right thing. And for me, because I always felt like an embedded journalist in the police department, I felt like an imposter.
Later that year, the task force investigators traveled to Seattle to interview Gary Ridgway, charged in 4 of 49 Green River homicides in Washington state.
On November 5th, 2003, all doubt of Ridgway's guilt was erased. He pleaded guilty to the murders of 48 women. He'd made a deal to cooperate with the prosecution to provide more information on his victims and the whereabouts of their remains. In doing so, he avoided a trial and possible death penalty.
Mr. Ridgway, how do you plead to the charge of aggravated murder in the first degree as charged in count 1 for the death of Wendy Lee Caulfield?
Guilty.
How do you plead to the charge of aggravated murder in the first degree as charged in count 2?
Guilty. Guilty. Guilty.
After successfully interviewing Ridgway, the task force adds 5 names to the list, bringing the total number of missing women to an even 50. With things heating up, the police searched the Pickton property on February 6, 2002, in accordance with a search warrant for illicit firearms. In order to examine the farm as part of the BC Missing Women investigation, police used what they had observed on the site to get a second warrant, leading to the arrest of both Pickton brothers. Personal belongings of women who went missing were discovered at the farm, and the RCMP and Vancouver Police Department Task Force sealed it off. Robert Pickton was charged with multiple counts involving weapons the next day and was detained under police observation. Robert's siblings were both later released. But what about Robert? Why was he left all alone in that jail cell? On seemingly the exact same charges as both his siblings. Reason being, following his initial arrest, Robert Pickton was later charged with his first 2 counts of first-degree murder in connection with the murders of Mona Wilson and Serena Abbotsway on February 22, 2002. With Pickton in custody, police began excavating the Pickton properties with the help of expert archaeologists. The provincial government estimated at the time that the probe will have cost $70 million by the end of 2003, with excavations at the site lasting until November of that year. The Crown, in right of British Columbia, acquired a lien on the property while evidence collected was done. Meanwhile, all the structures on the land were destroyed, with the exception of a tiny barn. In order to help locate signs of human remains, forensic anthropologists brought in heavy machinery early on in the excavation process, such as 2 50-foot flat conveyor belts and dirt sifters. The province's health authority later issued a warning after the government discovered on March 10, 2004, that Pickton may have combined ground-up human flesh with pork that he sold to the general public. He was also accused of feeding the corpses to his pigs directly.
Contamination could mean that human remains did get into or contaminate some of the pork meat that was produced.
The government's estimates were way off. By the end of the investigation, total costs easily exceeded $100 million, with $12 million of that allocated to Robert Pickton's eventual legal fees. But you see, at the time, it wasn't all bad news. Law enforcement uncovered numerous pieces of evidence on the farm, including missing Vancouver woman Sarah DeVries' DNA.
The one person she is identified with so much is a person who is now dead, violently dead, and she has to identify with that and yet separate herself. And I think that's desperately hard. But she's getting there. Slow process, but she's getting there.
But I like it. I like being like her. And I like knowing that I'm like her. Because in some ways it's like she's still here. And what she liked doing is still here.
After all work by law enforcement had been wrapped up by early 2005, a grand total of 27 counts of first-degree murder were filed against Pickton. On January 30th, 2007, Pickton's trial finally got underway in New Westminster, British Columbia. Pickton entered a not guilty plea to 27 first-degree murder counts before the British Columbia Supreme Court. To ascertain what evidence may be admitted to the jury, the selection process lasted the majority of that year. Judge Williams placed a publication ban on all media.
And to ensure a fair trial, the judge issued a strict ban, limiting what details journalists could share about the proceedings.
Justice James Williams dismissed one of the counts on March 17th due to insufficient evidence. Justice Williams divided the charges on August 9th into two groups, 6 counts each and 20 counts each. The jury trial for the first 6 counts of first-degree murder eventually began on January 22nd in connection with the killings of Wolfe, Wilson, Abbotsway, Foy, and Papin.
The cases were just so complex and so long, the judge ordered a severance so that the case would become manageable.
Pickton would first...
Eventually, the embargo on media access was removed, and all findings were finally made public, including the following. During Pickton's trial, lab staff testified that about 80 unidentified DNA profiles, roughly half female and half male, have been detected on evidence. A loaded .22 revolver with a dildo over the barrel and 1 round fired, boxes of Magnum handgun ammunition, night vision goggles, 2 pairs of fur-lined handcuffs, a syringe with 3 millimeters of blue liquid, and a Spanish fly aphrodisiac was found inside Pickton's trailer. And photos of the contents of a garbage can found in Pickton's slaughterhouse, which held some of the remains of victim Mona Wilson.
On the 8th of December, the victims' families and journalists gathered to hear the jury's verdict.
Suddenly we realized that some of the jurors were in tears. And that told me right away that there was going to be a problem with this.
Pickton was found guilty on 6 charges of second-degree murder, but not guilty on 6 counts of first-degree murder, according to the jury's decision on December 9th, 2007. Judge Justice James Williams of the British Columbia Supreme Court sentenced Pickton to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years on December 11th, 2007, following the reading of 18 victim impact statements. This punishment is the maximum for second-degree murder and is equivalent to the sentence that would have been imposed in the event of a first-degree murder conviction. Mr. Pickton repeatedly acted in a homicidal manner. Justice James Williams delivered the punishment saying, "I cannot know the details, but I do know this. What happened to them, the victims, was senseless and despicable." Given the severity and obvious premeditation of his crimes, the Canadian public was seriously outraged at this decision.
He should have been convicted on first-degree murder in all 6 counts.
So the jury's out now, and then we're going to wait for them to come back with their recommendations and find out what happens. It's, yeah, we're not happy with this verdict at all, man. It's very disappointing, very hard to deal with. I've been in this courtroom for 10 months, and the amount of stuff that I've heard in this courtroom, yeah, they should have come back with first-degree murder.
Hard day? Oh yeah, it's you know, you're puffed up, and then all of a sudden the verdict comes down, and you're let down because it wasn't first-degree murder, but he's still gonna pay.
Tricia, do you have any sense of why the jury went with second degree? What's your gut feeling as a reporter covering this?
Because they couldn't prove first degree. I mean, you can't prove that. I mean, there's enough doubt that Pickton didn't act alone. I mean, I don't believe he acted alone. I mean, so was he in the room with the other person and he pulled the trigger, or Dinah pulled the trigger, or who knows? So I think that's ultimately why they can go with first degree. And I mean, they have certain rules that they have to go by. I mean, us out here, we see all the information. We see the whole picture. They don't. So I think they absolutely made the best choice that they could have with the filters that they have to run their information through.
The emotions that we're seeing from you today and many others, what is that? Is that the case's trial ending, or the fact that there's a second-degree murder verdict here? What is that? Explain
Everything. I mean, people have been waiting 10 years for this. It's hard. I mean, we've been sitting here for, 10 days today, 9 days today, waiting for a verdict. It's everything that's just finally done. He's guilty. He's going to jail. Families have received their justice. Women were made to be what they are, which is women, not former junkies from the downtown east side.
Do you think the second trial is going to go ahead?
Oh yeah, I think it will. I think it will. I know it will.
What if
it better anyway.
Sorry. What if it doesn't?
Oh, I don't know. I'll probably disguise myself as sheriff and go in there and take care of myself.
Well, you know, on a moment like this, your heart just goes out to the families. I personally didn't know the women personally, but I was acquainted with them enough to recognize them. You know, I'd like to say that I hope that this brings some closure to the families of these 6 women. But having lost a brother young in my own life to similar circumstances, I worry about how they're going to go forward from here. This is a horrible, horrible event. I'm pleased that he was found guilty on all 6 counts.
Do you think anything's changed down there from the attention that we've seen on this case, prior to this case, and even with this verdict today? Anything has changed down there, going to change?
Well, I would hope that it's meant that people are more aware of the plight of particularly women, and certainly of the particular plight of Aboriginal women on their own land. But from what I see day to day, and the posters that go up in my office, it seems to me the city's desire and the Vancouver Police Force's desire to make this an issue of this particular convicted person right now, as opposed to a phenomenon that's happening in the neighborhood that's fed by what we see as systemic racism, and I don't think that's changed.
The jury just couldn't reconcile in their mind whether or not he acted alone.
And it's essentially about premeditation. And so you wonder how someone who killed 6 women didn't premeditate that it wasn't planned and orchestrated.
There are growing calls tonight for a public inquiry into the Robert Pickton case as more details emerge, now that the remaining 20 murder charges against him have been set aside.
In response to Pickton's acquittal on first-degree murder charges, the Attorney General filed an appeal with the British Columbia Court of Appeal on January 7, 2008. Pickton's attorneys also filed a notice of appeal in the British Columbia Court of Appeal on January 9, 2008. Requesting a new trial on 6 counts of second-degree murder. The defense claimed that the trial judge made mistakes in a number of areas which were included in the notice of appeal. These included the jury charge itself, Pickton's comments to the police, the jury charge amendment, and the jury's answer to questioning.
Convicted serial killer Robert Pickton will not get his wish for a new trial. He was convicted in 2007 of killing 6 women, but appealed his second-degree murder sentence. The appeal made its way to the country's highest court. Today, a decision. The Supreme Court of Canada handed down a ruling that means Pickton will spend the rest of his life behind bars. And though the court ended the legal arguments, it is not an end to the many questions surrounding the investigation into the Pickton murders.
Pickton's lawyers had argued before the Supreme Court that the judge erred in answering a question from the jury and violated Pickton's right to a fair trial. Today, the Supreme Court of Canada disagreed.
The Supreme Court of Canada's majority felt that the trial overall had been fair.
The evidence in this case was just staggering. It was overwhelming, and it led to only one conclusion, that Robert Pickton was guilty of murder.
While the trial may be wrapped up in the eyes of the law, it is far from over for the victims' families. And it all started with increasing calls for an inquiry for the treatment of victims based on their minority status.
The Vancouver Police Department and the RCMP have completed reports. We will want to review those reports and make a decision.
Eventually, a Missing Women's Commission was established. It was led by Wally Opal.
A long-awaited report on BC's missing women was unveiled today. It indicates the women were victims of prejudice and police failures. The nearly 1,500-page report looked at how convicted serial killer Robert Pickton was able to prey on vulnerable women in Vancouver's downtown east side for years without being caught. The police did receive tips long before his arrest in 2002, and even family members' concerns were not addressed.
Although many of the missing and murdered women had strong and close relationships, were loved by their families, friends within the downtown east side community, their marginalized status resulted in the women as individuals and as a group by many people as being nobodies.
Inquiry Commissioner Wally Opal came out with 63 recommendations. Global BC's Keith Baldry joins us now with details on the key recommendations. Keith?
Yes, Robin, pretty hard-hitting report regarding the police conduct and very wide-ranging in the type of recommendations Wally Opal's talking about. Chief among them, his call to establish a regional police force in Metro Vancouver. His inquiry uncovered all sorts of miscommunications between various police agencies in that region. Also, more training and better training for police officers regarding their when they deal with vulnerable people, people with addiction problems, and Aboriginal people as well. And also potential establishment of a fund, a compensation fund for the families of the victims of Robert Pickton.
Keith, what's the reaction been like?
Well, so far from the province, from the provincial government, pretty swift reaction. They've appointed former Lieutenant Governor, BC Lieutenant Governor Stephen Point as the chair of an advisory committee to see how they can implement these recommendations. Also contributed $750,000 for a drop-in center on the downtown east side. Still unclear, though, whether we're ever going to see that regional police force in Metro Vancouver. It's been on the boards for 30 years now. It's been talked about a long time. It's going to take more than an inquiry like this one to actually establish it. So still lots to do in the weeks ahead. It's a cash-strapped government. I'll be surprised if they got the money to fund all of what Wally Opal's looking for.
Keith Baldry reporting tonight. Thanks, Keith.
All right.
Although it was nice he made it official, there are some serious mixed feelings about the inquiry's outcome.
I mean, this inquiry was, it didn't give us any ending to the chapter of that book that we've been reading for the last 15 years. Like, we're still not any further ahead today than we were when I first started looking for Marnie in 1997.
But the real news that day was the judge's decision to have the remaining 20 counts stayed.
To think that we still have 20 charges that have never been tried against Robert Pickton feels like unfinished business to me.
So I wish to say to the families that we're sorry from the bottoms of our hearts that we didn't catch him sooner.
Making this news sting even more were the newly released videotapes of Pickton and an undercover officer. In these tapes, Pickton admitted to 49 murders. It gets worse. Here, just take a listen for yourself.
No. No. What have you done? No. No. Carcasses. So what do you got? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. What? Yeah. Come on, what are you fucking this up? Okay, I know what's up. You fucking got it. You're a fucking missing person. So I agree with fucking how you made it. You got it. Fucking guys are right. I find the best way to fucking dispose of something is fucking take it to the ocean. Oh, really? Fuck. You know what the fucking ocean is? You much love. David, that. Who be now? Yeah. No shit. I started fucking pretty good. Okay? Too much fucking left. I'm talking. You just talking. Really? It is fucking. See? Fucking God, fucking ridiculous. Fucking. I was remember having such a free. That's fucking pretty. Pretty good there. That's fucking pretty good. I think you're doing something right. Fucking beautiful. You gotta fucking but the problem they have bigger than me. It's funny. Doesn't make sense. No shit, eh? Well, they got a fucking prince, you know? They have a prince. I wasn't sure you moved here. No. You didn't do you? Don't fucking say anything. I can let things slide. So we're not going to keep forward. You want to get bail? Like I said, that's fucking up to the judge, right? No. You guys realize that? No shit. They don't know what to say. They what? They don't know what to say. You fucking give it a good push. Yeah. For something like this, fucking worth it. You know? I can make things disappear. I was going to do one more. Maybe. That's what I was talking about. Yeah. I'm going to do one more. Make a big battle. Make a big fight. That's fuck. Fucking 5-0. Fucking have fun. Yeah. This is the best part. I fucking really want. How many of those would tell you? Would tell you? Yeah. Talk about half. Talk about 1/4. Talking about all of them. You gotta get 40 people to list. And then on the list, I'm gonna have the people. The other half of mine, I am lying. So they got those eating. They can't even put a name to it. How the fuck is that off here? That's not shit. Yeah. Right? Looks good on you. But I think we're going to nail these are fucking fuck us. I think we're going to deliver us. But if that happens, there's about 15 other people going to go down. Gosh, it's going to go down like that. Yeah. I said they're my friends. Get between me and you, man. But you know what? That fucking deal you gotta do for yourself. I thought they were my friends. Yeah. Where's the one TV interview? No shit. You see the interviews about the people. And he says, you feel the syringes up with antifreeze, and you inject yourself. You're dead better than 10 minutes. He says in an interview, yes. Another party says, yeah, I mean, officers, probably got a lot of stuff on me. No shit. That's why it's part of it. That's only part of it. That's not part of it. Everybody says, yeah, they beat the piss out of me. And he said, if I get a copy of the stuff that I stole in one day, I'll be hanging in the barn upside down. I said, really, we don't want it on tape. He said, I come back right now. To testify. No shit. So it's going to be a big time. Because I'm telling you the first. I made no grief. I mean, it's like, it's not just kicking your ass now. But it pisses me off. Fucking horrible. You know, it pisses me right off because of problems. They're just, they don't have nothing, but nothing otherwise. Oh, man. Nothing. I won't fucking piss you off now. Really fucking piss me off. I was just gonna one more bigger than ladies, bigger than months and states. Yeah. Oh yeah, this is great.
Pickton was eventually moved from Kent Institution in British Columbia to a different prison in Port Cartier, Quebec in June 2018. Coincidentally, the same prison as the infamous Netflix documentary Don't Fuck with Cats killer, Luca Magnotta. In the wake of the aftermath of trial, the victims' families face an up and down battle.
People who lost loved ones to Robert Pickton are getting some financial compensation. That news comes as 3 levels of government plan to respond to criticism over how the case was handled. 11 children of women murdered by the serial killer have agreed to packages worth $50,000 each. A group of 13 sued the city of Vancouver, the province, and the feds last year. The legal action came after Wally Opal recommended financial compensation in his report on the missing women's case. Later today, officials from all 3 levels of government will respond to key recommendations of an inquiry into the women's deaths.
$50,000 is a great deal of money by most people's standards. For our children, for our clients, many of whom are dispossessed and poverty-stricken, these funds represent an opportunity for them to bring their lives back to where they might have been if their mothers hadn't been killed.
The children's lawsuit claimed police and the Crown were negligent in pursuing Pickton, allowing him to kill more women. The remains of 33 women were found at his farm after his arrest in 2002.
I only now have a voice because I'm no longer there and I've written a book, but before that I couldn't speak out, and it was incredibly frustrating because even when I tried to speak out, because my experience through this investigation was as a female, nobody was listening, and I had this frustration all the time of feeling like, basically in a nutshell for the audience, we knew quite early on who the suspect was in this, who became Canada's largest serial killer. I had a tip the second day on the job, And I could not get the resources and the people in place to actually arrest this man or conduct an investigation in order to arrest him. And I think that that's the tragedy, because there's that overarching attitude that these women don't matter, these investigations don't matter. We have all the investigative tools in the world in place, but there's nothing that tells an individual police officer, policeman, that this is important, and you need to tell people this is important. We have a major case management model, but someone has to designate it a major case. And unfortunately, 17, 21, 31 missing women, mostly Indigenous, was never considered a major case by anybody in charge.
To this day, the victims are still facing an uphill battle. The BC RCMP recently released a statement stating they're making applications into the disposal of all land connected to the Pickton case.
The RCMP is being called out for its handling of evidence in the largest serial killer investigation in Canadian history. The Mounties want to destroy thousands of pieces of evidence linked to the infamous Robert Pickton case. Victims' advocates say they believe it's a sign police are giving up on the pursuit of justice. CTV's Kevin Chirac has more, and a warning some may find the images and details are disturbing.
Questions still remain of the many missing women linked to serial killer Robert Pickton's Port Coquitlam pig farm.
There is absolutely the problem of the compromise of justice.
Sasha Reid co-wrote a letter calling on RCMP to halt its court application to dispose of thousands of pieces of evidence linked to the farm. Robert Pickton was convicted in 2007 of killing 6 women, but families of other missing women with their DNA found at the farm are still searching for justice.
To them and so many others, this case feels problematic.
The evidence being everyone's loved one's belongings, which is a cold way to say it. These women had a lot of friends in the downtown east side who would be more than happy to come in and identify the belongings that are there in the evidence lockers or warehouse or wherever they are. There's no reason for them to say that it has no value when these were human beings who were loved by the people who cared for them deeply. And there are still so many people out there who have recovered, who are still in the downtown east side, who would be willing to come walk through and identify things that have yet to be identified because they knew the women, they were with them every day, they were street family, as I mentioned before. So there's no reason to just destroy without having that last walkthrough.
Thank you.
My greatest fear is there won't be evidence to convict certain people who haven't been charged with their murders. You know, when I'm going to go back to that last question, because I do recall at the Wally Opal inquiry that there were certain witnesses that were either supposed to take the stand, they were supposed to have a certain amount of time, and they were pushed through quickly because of the timing, and that's why the families fought for more time. And even sitting at the Wally Opal inquiry, I do feel like there was a lot of stuff brought out that haven't been brought out to public. Like those 50 unsolved cases. Like, I don't understand why those haven't been talked about. I think I kind of know why. Yeah, and I do recall how police officers on duty treated our Indigenous women and girls, and that was brought out in the Wally Opal inquiry as well. You know, like, I remember, I don't know if she testified or if she was going to testify. There was a woman who lost her hearing because they were driving down the back alleys with them in the paddy wagon. Like, why did they do that to her? You know, I don't even know if I'm supposed to be mentioning that. I can't remember if she testified, but that just shows how VPD treated our Indigenous women and girls, those women in the downtown east side, and you know, the whole thing about them being on the farm, VPD and RCMP, like they were there along with others.
The BC Civil Liberties Association is one of more than 40 individuals and groups to sign in support of the letter. The BCCLA is proud to support the families of victims in seeking accountability and justice for their loved ones. Lawyer Jason Grattel, representing victims' families, says destroying the evidence could impact his case.
We have commenced a lawsuit against the Pickton brothers for compensation for the children. Some of those exhibits, some of the key exhibits, are evidence that we need in order to establish our civil claim.
RCMP issuing an emailed statement to CTV News. To be clear, as all possible evidence has been captured and retained, the disposal of property would not affect any future prosecution. It continues. Ultimately, the process is required by law and is for the intended purpose of returning property to the rightful owners where applicable, or for the disposal of items not claimed. Grattel believes there's just too many unanswered questions, such as, did Pickton act alone?
Even if this is an RCMP cold case, that doesn't justify the destruction of evidence that could be used to apprehend unindicted conspirators or co-perpetrators.
Reed and other advocates, along with family members of some of the victims, will be holding a press conference Monday and sharing a letter with officials urging RCMP to preserve the evidence. Kevin Chirac, CTV News, Vancouver.
As the fight for justice continues, please help spread awareness. Like, subscribe, and share this story with your friends. Until next time, stay informed, stay curious, and never stop exploring.
Hi there, my name is Sarah Jean DeVries. I'm one of the adult children of one of the missing murdered women connected to the Robert Pickton case. I agree with everything that's been said. This is an ongoing, pending investigation. It is incomplete. There is way more to this case than the general public knows, and families are willing or able to disclose for reasons we're not allowed to disclose. It's not uncommon knowledge that Robert Pickton didn't act alone and there were more involved. And if you look at the history of cold cases, mostly all of that evidence is kept forever, pretty much. Why, in this case, are they trying to erase the evidence? It leads to a lot of questions that we all have.